Hey everyone, this is a recording of our midterm review before the midterm exam for Lecture 8. So this is a reminder, first of all, in week 8 we don't have any labs, it's just a review lecture. If you do need to speak to me, then email me for an appointment. So the exam itself will be happening on Monday, March 3rd, 1 until 3 p.m. Do bring a calculator. It will be helpful. It won't be anything too technical. It's just some of the simple calculations that we did in some of the labs that we ran. Generally fairly simple stuff, but it will be a lot easier and quicker with a calculator. So do bring one along. So the content to review for the exam will be the lecture content, all the lectures, the labs, the assignments, and some of the readings as well. So hopefully the readings, hopefully you would have done along the way. It's most of what you need will be in the lecture slides, will be the lab content that we did. The assignments would have cemented that learning that we did in the lectures and the labs. So that's the way you want to do it. Check out the study guide that I have posted and you'll see all of the content that we covered. It will be a reminder and you can run through the lecture and lab slides. Okay, so in lectures 1 and 2, we had an introduction to business analytics and its strategic role. So we started with an introduction and the definition of which is written here. Business analytics is the science of applying a structured method to solve a business problem using data and analysis to drive impact. So hopefully that's become more apparent to you what that means as you've actually been doing some of this, particularly in the one of the last assignment that you did, where you looked at data within a dashboard and um, uh, tried to solve a business problem of increasing revenue for a client. Um, so the value basically comes from combining intuition with solid analysis. So we looked at that, and we'll cover that in a second. From the textbook, it talks about doing that. That you have the traditional business intuition, but in order to make more confident decisions, you need the backup of the data. So that's what that business analytics insight at the point of impact is talking about. It's finding insight from the data that you have in order to affect the point of impact. So the place where that might be responsible for sales not being what they should be, or cost rising too high, or customer satisfaction being low. So what we're aiming for is data-driven decisions. So analytics is used to support organizational goals at all levels within the organization. So if we remember, we had the strategic, tactical, and operational um, levels of analytics. So we start off with the strategic, which is the overall mission and vision of a company, and everything needs to ultimately align with those goals. The tactical level is basically, well, what are we going to do in order to try and achieve that? And then the operational level is just all the individual departments of an organization, how their day-to-day running takes place. So why analytics? What are the drivers of it? Well, first of all, there's more data than ever. Technology has been improving all the time. Things like Power BI, making it easier for you to access data, to play around with data and look for insight. And that's led to this, or has been part of a demand for self-sufficiency. That demand in business for self-serve business analytics has driven those technological advances. Um, and the need to optimize drivers of business performance. So that's basically the need to become more efficient in the way that we run business. So the more you learn about what your costs are and where are you all your resources going to, you can analyze that with analytics and then make efficiencies where you most need them. And of course, competition. If you want to stay ahead, you need the best information possible, and hopefully before other people have it. So, as we were talking about, to be effective in analytics, you need both data science and people skills, the business track. So the technical track and the business track. The technical track, of course, is just learning how to use these analytical tools and accessing the data and knowing how to find insight from it. The business track is making sure that the company is on board with all of this, working with people, decision makers within the organization, knowing exactly what is it we're trying to find out and who needs to know, to make sure you are getting the right information for the right decisions. So those two things, those two key skills are needed in order for it to be effective. So within analytics, there is a hypothesis-driven analytics process. So that starts with asking simple questions. We have a problem, or a challenge, or an opportunity, and there you need to ask, well, what's happening that's not supposed to happen, or perhaps what should have happened? And then you need to identify, well, why is it? Why is that happening? Why are sales down? Why are people unhappy? Or why didn't we see this opportunity or this new technology? And once you understand, well, what the questions are, we then need to develop hypotheses. And most of the time it will be, well, I think I kind of know. We have an inkling of why it might be. Well, let's have a look, see what the data says. Here are our ideas of why things are happening. Let's get some data and test those ideas. You test, you find out what you think is the main issue. Testing different places, where have there been significant changes? And you focus on making changes in that particular place, that point of impact, and see what happens. You measure what happens. Does it have an impact? If it doesn't, then you look again. But that's basically the process that we've seen. In terms of the main types of business analytics, we had, remember, our descriptive analytics, predictive, and prescriptive. So in terms of complexity and level of insight, we start off with the descriptive is the most commonly used analytics. We use past as well as current data to know what has or is happening. So we'd ask the questions of what's happened, what is happening in real time, perhaps, and we'll get summary statistics, data visualizations, dashboards, that type of thing with our descriptive analytics. What's happening or what has happened. Predictive analytics uses advanced calculations and builds predictive models to project into the future using past data. What is likely to happen? What could happen in the future if certain things carry on as they are? You can then forecast what you're likely to be earning or what your costs are likely to be based on what we know has been happening. Prescriptive analytics is based on what we now know. It's about what we should do next. So through prescriptive analytics, you can do various types of testing. How do customers react to different types of changes? And that should direct us to say, well, this change that we've made was the most effective, and this is the one we are prescribing for our future. So you just need to know each type of analytics and those questions. So the questions will be in the slides that we had in the lectures. And so here we've got this visual which shows across the top our time frame, data from the past, the present, and the future. Down here is what we get from that data, whether it is information we already knew or whether we are generating new insight. So down the bottom here, known information from our past data, we can run reports on what has happened. Present data, we can run reports or dashboards. We can monitor what is happening right now, and that may include certain early warnings or alerts. And then for the future, we can take the data that we've got and we can extrapolate to see what might happen in the future if it continues as it is. When we're generating new insight from past data, then we are trying to work out how and why certain things happened. So we have our hypothesis that we will test. What's the best action? What are the recommendations based on what's happening right now? And then for the future, what is potentially the best or worst case scenarios? We can run our tests, our A/B tests, and say, well, basically, the worst that might happen is we'll get, our ROI will hit a possible low and a possible high, and we can make decisions on what we should do next. Okay, so we looked at this, as it's described, spectrum of data analytics, and it's traditionally split between two things: business intelligence and business analytics. So on the left here, we have our business intelligence, and that's all about collection, storage, governance of data, making sure it is taken care of, it's protected, private, and it's generally kept by IT, and they can run reports for you, create dashboards for you. Generally, they'll be static because they don't want you accessing the data and ruining it, basically. And this is compared with our traditional business analytics. So that's all about analysis of data and generating insights, being allowed to play with the data without impacting the integrity of the data, using various tools in order to do that. Those tools can just range from just simple Excel to much more complex type of analytics tools. Now, in order to be successful, they need to be collaborative to support the organization's strategic goals. So you need to include your users, your analysts, your data scientists, and your IT and data specialists. So they need to work together in those respects. So now we've moved on to competing on analytics. We now understand a bit more about what analytics is, what the types are, etc. Now we want to understand more about how we can be competitive by using analytics. So on the left, we have our analytical capability, and then the right, our analytical maturity. So in terms of capability, remember this came from Thomas Davenport. He has this acronym. So for you, you just need to remember what that acronym spells out. So first of all, you need good data. Then it needs to be enterprise orientation. It means the company as a whole needs to be on board with all of this. In order to get there, you need analytical leadership. You need leaders within the company that are going to push this forward, and a specialist in order to run the analytics team. You want a strategic target. That means a goal. You need to set goals that can be measured and achieved. Once you achieve some simple primary goals, then you'll start to apply this a lot more widely within an organization. To achieve it all, you'll need a team of analysts, whether they're trained in-house or you bring people in to do that. So that's how you develop your capability. This talks about the analytical maturity of an organization, starting off with being analytically impaired there. So you're starting to collect data, but not necessarily making use of it. Then we move to stage 2, where it's localized. You're working in silos. Some departments are using it and running analytics and benefiting from it, where others aren't. Slowly, as the company drives towards analytical aspirations, some senior executives start to see the value in it and start to collaborate. And then we move into eventually becoming this analytical company. It's been taken on, and they're doing pretty much what other companies are doing in terms of using analytics to become more efficient. And the only other stage left is to become analytical competitors, where you are driven by analytics, your decisions are driven by analytics, and you're looking for new types of data analytics or new data points that other companies might not be using or have seen yet. So that's how you become most competitive in the market there. So the analytical competitor, organizations competing on analytics systematically outperform the competition. So here we basically combine the delta components and the analytical maturity across the top there. So for each one of those components for capability, they will develop over time in that maturity. And the example we'd spoken about in the lecture was going through the data one. You don't need to know all of this stuff. As I said before, this just gives you an idea of how it all comes together. But you should know something of the acronym there and the sort of progression in the level of maturity. Okay, so this was in labs 1 and 2. We looked at how data is stored and used in analytics using Access as a simple example. So here we've got the two main types of database structure are relational on the left and non-relational on the right. So the relational database, when we're working in Access, this is optimized, as it says, for writing. So it's ideal for transactional data. You want something fast and accurate, and that's why they split the data up. So you don't have this, your process is weighed down by all of this additional data that doesn't need to change, doesn't need to be present in the transaction, so that can be stored separately. So when the transaction's running, you're using the least amount of data, and it's much more efficient. Yeah, most businesses will have some form of relational database. So the non-relational database, on the other hand, this is where you want all of the data in one place because you want to be able to analyze the data. You want to slice and dice it by different components of the data. So you want everything together. So what you'll usually do is extract data from a relational database and put it into a non-relational format so that you can work with that. Okay, so this is just a reminder. The key points to remember about our marketing databases there. So we'll just highlight those 3 zones that we had. First step, remember, was to define the mission and objectives of the database. What is it for? Why are we creating this database? So you understand a bit more about where things should go, what needs to be included. So this kind of goes back to that project as well, or the assignment, the first assignment. So in the database itself, we had those 3 main zones with the various tables in each. Remember, for our for a business-to-business marketing database, we need a company table. In the customer table, a separate customer table there, we had 3 sections. Remember, we had the contact fields, we had our privacy fields, the do not contact, credit risk, inactive, and we had our marketing fields with our recency, frequency, monetary, and acquisition source. We also included things like wholesale status, and of course, we had our IDs, our keys, so our primary and foreign keys there. Remember, we had our 2 transactional tables. We had an order header, which is our invoice, the fields dealing with the order itself, order date, payment, the order discount, all those sorts of things. And then the order detail, which is a much smaller table with the individual units of each order. So the quantity of each thing, the unit price and the unit discount, that type of thing. Remember, it's not a marketing database without an offer table. And the other thing, the primary and foreign keys, remember the composite key and the order details because it's a junction table linking 2 tables together. So those are just some of the details to remember in terms of the creation of the database. The next lab we worked on are queries. So remember, first of all, you need to arrange the tables so you can see them fully. You want to select the fields. So really, if you just go through the components at the bottom here, you need to select which fields are included in your query. You want to specify any sorting in there. You need to decide whether to show the field in the result. Is that necessary? Then specify any criteria. And remember, you need to understand why you would be running queries for your recency, frequency, or monetary, as well as things like the function of the total row. Why did we include the total row in some cases? We had a return button that we used that was, if we wanted to produce or output the top or bottom values, we'd sort and then use the return. How we could ensure we just get unique values. So those were things we covered and you may want to be aware of or remember. Okay. That brings us on to marketing analytics for ROI. Remember, labs, I think 3 and 4 now we're on. So here we were looking at our performance management, and it's all about measuring and monitoring the execution of strategies. So let's open up this. So we have, remember, our business process involves our strategies. What are we doing? What are we trying to achieve? Then our tactics. What are the actions we need to take in order to achieve those strategic goals? And then what are the day-to-day operations that need to occur? And how can they be most efficient? So it's all about, every business activity is viewed from two perspectives: value creation, which is the outcome, the benefits of this business process, and using resources up in order to create that value. So use of resources needs to be as efficient as possible in order to minimize the drain on our resources and maximize value. And strategies must translate effectively into our tactics and our operations to generate the greatest value. So here we can see our resources used. They have to be as efficient as possible to get the best value. And so that's efficiencies. The effectiveness of our strategies, our tactics and operations have to translate through the different levels of the organization as well in order to be most effective. And how do we know if they're effective? Well, we need to be able to measure them. So we come up with specific KPIs in order to measure the performance. We look at, well, what were we doing last year in this particular action or activity? And what are we doing this year or this quarter? And how does it compare? Are we achieving what we need to achieve? And so remember, their performance management occurs at all levels. And of course, they all need to align with each other, ultimately aligning with the overall strategic goals of the organization. So they all kind of follow the same process, just with a different focus in each stage. So we use metrics or KPIs to measure and manage performance. Those are those that are of interest to decision makers. That's the important thing. So the first step, we need to make sure we are analyzing and producing output that is going to be important to the people that make the decisions in our organization. So we want to know the impact of each marketing investment, know which parts of your marketing deliver financial returns, and you want to do that in order to maintain your credibility. You want to focus on the return on your investment rather than your marketing spend. It shouldn't be looked at as spending. You want to change the perception of marketing as a cost and rather as an investment. So let's just open this up. So planning for marketing ROI, you identify upfront goals, KPIs, and ROI estimates. You design measurable programs with high impact KPIs and focus on decisions that improve marketing. So without establishing goals of a program, people will question marketing investments. If you don't, if you're not able to clearly measure and show the impact of your marketing campaigns, then no one's really going to know whether they've worked or not. So that's what this is. This performance management was all about, and knowing which metrics to monitor in order to keep the important decision makers happy. So we also looked at marketing automation, implementing an automation platform such as Marketo or HubSpot, which will help with your lead to revenue management process. So that's what it's all about. How impactful is the marketing process of taking your potential customers through the funnel to become customers. So for marketing automation, the goal is to increase the sales efficiency. You want to be as efficient as possible and effective as possible in the marketing part of this process so that customers are as sales ready as they can be once the salespeople contact them. So the automation process basically does so much of the day-to-day activities that would be otherwise time consuming. So um, you can set up email contacts, etc., based on wherever people are in this sales funnel. So you want to um, start off with attracting customers or potential customers, and that's going to happen via multiple channels. You want to be able to then nurture them, send them targeted marketing materials, and see how they react. You would then score them based on the way that they respond to these different things and use that lead scoring, and the automation process will do that for you. By setting up that lead scoring, you'll know when they are ready or sales ready, and they move down the pipeline there. Okay, so in labs 3 and 4, I've got all these right. We looked at some commonly used marketing metrics. So remember, this is where it will be very beneficial to have your calculator. So remember, in those spreadsheets, we were looking at various ways of monitoring ROI. So the marketing ROI, the what if ROI, aggregate ROI, and incremental ROI. So you won't have access to Excel to run a goal seek or anything like that. It's going to focus more on that. If you remember, the aggregate or the incremental ROI process towards the end of that lab, where we generate insights from test data, whether a marketing initiative should be rolled out. So remember that process that we did there. It was from some fairly simple calculations. There was a formula that we used. You'll be provided with that formula. We also looked at customer metrics in Lab 4, and that was when we had the CSAT, the customer effort score, the Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter, it's easier if you have a calculator. You can use that. You just have to remember how the Net Promoter Score was calculated, and also how to interpret a priority matrix, everything that we did in that lab. That brings us on to data visualization, lecture 5 and labs 5 and 6. This is where we looked at dashboards, developing dashboards. There were sort of our key principles. There was our best practices, basically. Starting off with the 4 key principles there. We want to determine the message, choose the best type of encoding. We want to increase our data to ink ratio, so less ink, more data shown on the visualizations. Minimize the distractors, provide benchmarks. It's important to know whatever we're seeing, is it good or not? So we get that from including benchmarks. So in Lab 5, we used Power BI this time to apply some of the data visualization concepts. So you put together that dashboard in the lab while you were at home, I think, that week. And then we moved on to start looking at using Power BI to first load data. You've built visuals and you've analyzed the data, particularly in this second assignment that you had. You were looking for a compelling story to tell by observing, analyzing, investigating, and coming up with actions. Okay, so in the lecture, we compared balanced scorecards to dashboards. Saw that while they were quite similar, they do have some key differences. So on the left here, we see scorecards are typically in larger tables with many KPIs. They always had their 4 strategic key areas that included the financial, the internal business process, the customer area, and the employee area, the learning and growth. So that's what set it apart. Lots of detail in there. Typically, they were static, and this compares to dashboards, which are sort of have far less information on there. Just a few graphics, few KPIs. The different types we looked at, the strategic, tactical, or operational. So that just basically says wherever you are operating in the organization, you'll have a different focus on your dashboard. You'll have different interests in terms of your KPIs and the type of data you're looking at. The strategic is more about monitoring. The tactical is more about analyzing data. The operational, again, is a bit more about monitoring as well. And the data often is close to real time or real time and dynamic, so it would change, but as long as someone was taking care of it. So both measure enterprise performance against predetermined KPI benchmarks. So the benchmarks are always important to include. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour of what we have covered this term. There was quite a lot in there. If you run through the exam guide and basically go over the lecture slides and what we covered in lab, and hopefully what you worked on in the two assignments sort of cemented that learning and were of help. So here's the list of things we covered. The exam will be Monday, March 3rd at 1 p.m. Bring a calculator and I will see you there.